welcome everybody to the webinar here this afternoon, at least this afternoon here in the UK. I'm going to get going with really looking at a different type of webinar to what we've been used to doing. And this is on the back of an announcement that was made last year, back in May, about the deprecation of business connectivity services, which is actually a feature of SharePoint that is very close to our heart. So we actually started Lightning Tools on the back of what was the business data catalog that later became business connectivity services. And yeah, we had a couple of products that were based around business connectivity services, which we'll briefly talk about, just to give a bit of background to what we're going to be looking at today as alternatives to business connectivity services. And that really is options of bringing in external data that reside maybe throughout our organization or externally to our organization, and we want to be able to integrate at least visually with inside of Microsoft SharePoint, so people can make better business decisions and so on with that data being accessible to them. So we're going to get things started with a quick intro to Lightning Tools for those of you that are new to us. For those of you who already know a little bit about Lightning Tools, you've got just a few minutes to maybe top up your coffee or whatever you want to do, and we're going to then get into a bit of a history lesson on business connectivity services just for a few minutes before looking at what some of those alternatives are for BCS inside of SharePoint and perhaps also Teams as well. A quick intro, Lightning Tools. We've been providing tools and web parts for Microsoft SharePoint now for over 17 years. As just mentioned, we started off on the back of the business data catalog with a product called BDC MetaMan, and we've grown our portfolio to lots of different types of data integration tools, data visualization tools, which we'll be looking at, but also other areas of Microsoft SharePoint that include things like permissions, content aggregation, discussion board integration, and also forms as well. So throughout our products, we offer these to all different types of organizations throughout the world, so that you can, of course, integrate those and get a better experience from SharePoint, do things a lot quicker than you would be able to manually. So we are UK based. We have got a presence also in the United States. That's in Orlando, Florida, where we use that base to serve a lot of our US customers, as well as serving from our tech support team over here in the UK as well. Let's get started. So in terms of the history lesson that I mentioned, we all the way back in 2007, around the time of MOS 2007, if anybody knows of that, it was a fairly early version of SharePoint, a little bit clunky, but of course MOS grows on you. So it was the Microsoft Office SharePoint server that saw the introduction of the business data catalog. And the business data catalog was essentially a way of connecting to external data that could be in the form of not just SQL databases, but also other types of databases inside our organization. It could be Oracle databases, it could have been DBase, it could have been Excel. In fact, almost anything that you could connect to via ODBC, you would be able to generate a connection to, and that allowed you to use several different components within inside of SharePoint to interact with that data somehow. And we had initially some web parts that you might want to use. So these were read-only web parts at the time. So there was a BDC list web part, which effectively allowed you to view a table of contents in a sort of grid view format. There was also a BDC related list web part, which used a web part connection, allowing you to mimic the relationship on the database side. So if you had, for example, a customer table, you also had maybe an orders table, you could join those two together so that you could select maybe a customer and see the related products or orders to that customer, so the orders that they'd made. So there was those suite of web parts. There was also a list item web part, which you can see over on the right hand side of this screenshot, that showed just a single row in a column format, and that could also be used using a web part connection. So you could select a row from the BDC list web part, and that would show the detail of that list item in the column format. So that was just some of the different web parts that you had. There was also search integration as well. So using the enterprise search, you could build effectively a search result set around tables that you'd connected to using BCS, allowing you to look up, of course, maybe customer names or product names and so on, and that information would be returned just as though it was a standard SharePoint list item that was being returned inside the search. In order to make that happen, you had to build like a profile page for each entity so that it could load a search result and show you the information that was coming from that keyword that you searched for. There was also lookup columns as well. So it's the lookup columns that allowed you to effectively extend SharePoint lists so that you could look up content from a backend system as well. This is great actually if you integrated it into a document library. So as people created documents inside of SharePoint document libraries, in terms of metadata, you could look up from maybe a list of customers or a list of products and so on, select one of those, and that would become the metadata associated with the document. So really powerful in terms of being able to find content in the future that was supporting a document stored in the document library. And of course, you could also build custom applications as well. So there was a whole API that allowed you to crack open Visual Studio and build your own custom web parts. We built a series of those as well. We had BDC KPI web parts, we had BDC chart web parts, and so on that we were also offering back in the day. So that was the business data catalog. And then in SharePoint 2010, things evolved. We had business connectivity services, which was effectively the same thing, but plus a couple of extra features. So one of the features was an external list. So the external list allowed you to effectively treat the content coming from a database table as though it was a standard SharePoint list. It wasn't importing the data, it was still linking to the data, but that allowed you to go into your external list. You could create new items, you could edit items and delete items just like you could do with the standard SharePoint list. So there was that addition, and then the way that you could connect as well to different data sources changed. So originally under the BDC, it was all through an XML file that you would create, and through business connectivity services, you were able to use Visual Studio. You could create assemblies that would effectively be the external content type, allowing you to connect to those data sources. Yeah, that meant that you could do those in Visual Studio as well as just writing XML. So I apologize for the very low resolution image here, but this is actually an early shot of BDC MetaMan, if anybody ever used that. So BDC MetaMan was our first ever product from Lightning Tools. We built Lightning Tools around the concept of the business data catalog, because when Microsoft launched BDC, there was this great response to the fact that we can bring in all this data from external data sources and bridge silos of data inside an organization, but there wasn't an easy way of doing it unless you really knew XML. And that's why we decided to build this product called BDC MetaMan that provided you with a graphical user interface so that you could connect to different data sources, you could map the associations between different tables and views, etc., and then you could effectively publish that back out to SharePoint, and that would generate the XML for you, which made it a lot easier if you wanted to connect to some of these different data sources. And that supported SQL, Oracle, OWC, a lot of different data sources there. And I also wrote my first book as well, which was really a painful experience. I'd never done it before. I'd contributed some chapters to different books and so on, but this was something that I created probably 90% of, documenting the whole of the business data catalog, and then I swore that I was never ever going to do it again. It was like when you wake up with a hangover, and this painful experience is now over, and you swear you're never going to drink again. I swore that I was never going to write a book again, and then BCS came along, and I wrote another book. So we created the Business Connectivity Services SharePoint 2010 book, which of course covered some of the additional features as well, and I eventually did learn my lesson there. But we also evolved BDC MetaMan to become BCS MetaMan, completely new interface, and also gave a lot of extra features as well to support things like external lists and so on that you could also create. So that's how we started off. So you can imagine last year when we heard the retirement of Business Connectivity Services was scheduled. So this announcement was made in May 23, and what you can do from, or what you could have done from or still do, from the 2nd of October, is actually go into your Microsoft 365 Admin Center, and you can set a property to block business connectivity services from being used inside your SharePoint Online tenant or Microsoft 365 tenant. So that's something you can do now to stop people using the BCS features. From the 30th of October, Microsoft will start blocking those features for you where you've set that property. And from the 8th of Jan, just a couple of days ago, any new tenants created in Microsoft 365 won't be able to use BCS. That won't be a feature. And then the planned retirement, where it's fully retired, is going to be the 30th of September 2024. So we know that there's a lot of people that are using BCS, of course, in SharePoint on premises as well as SharePoint Online. And those that are in SharePoint on premises aren't going to be affected by this, other than if you're planning to, of course, migrate to SharePoint Online. That BCS part is not going to migrate. You're going to have to look for an alternative when you move across to Microsoft 365. Those of you that are using Microsoft 365 already and you're making use of BCS, then you may want to look for alternatives now so that you can still bring that data into SharePoint and serve your users. So we're just going to have a very quick look at what BCS looked like or looks like now in SharePoint Online. So it's still somewhat available inside our demonstration tenant, albeit the web parts have actually already disappeared. I couldn't access those, but I could still create an external list. So what you'll see in here, if I just jump into my site contents, and I'm just going to drop my camera here. So inside the site contents, I'm just going to go into this products external list. You can see it actually says there's 0 items, and that's because those items don't actually reside at all inside of SharePoint. They're still inside the backend database, which is in this case in SQL Azure. And what you can see here is a whole list of different products that we can paginate through. And this is actually one of the problems why it wasn't very well adopted inside of SharePoint Online, is because, as you'll notice, I was on a modern SharePoint site, but when I come into an external list, I'm back in the classic mode, and I've actually got ribbons at the top and things like that we haven't seen for some time now. But this does allow us to do things like edit items, delete items, view items. You could create multiple views in here and so on and so forth. And that's effectively how BCS looked inside of an external list. As I click onto an item here, you'll see that it opens it up inside also that classic view and gives us that ability to go through and edit the item from there if we want to. Okay, so that's how we could connect to the data, work with the data inside of SharePoint. And what Microsoft is proposing as a replacement for that is Power Apps. So if you look at the retirement notice coming from Microsoft, they're offering Power Apps as an alternative. But what I want to show you today is also how Power BI might also be an alternative to the business connectivity services inside of SharePoint. But then, of course, we're also going to demonstrate some of our products, such as the data viewer, along with the filters web part, and a new product through a partnership, which is known as SQList, and how they could also form part of a sort of alternative to business connectivity services as well. So if we take the official approach from Microsoft and start looking at Power Apps is obviously something that's been around for quite some time. It's also been able to connect to external data sources for quite some time as well. And you could, of course, do that inside of a mobile view, but there's also Canvas apps and so on where you can use that data as well and integrate that via a Power Apps web part. So this is just a quick example of what that Canvas app could look like, and you can generate this very, very quickly using Power Apps and using one of the connections to SQL. There's some other data sources that we'll also have a look at there as well that can be that are supported. So that's the encouragement from Microsoft, and it is in their terms encouragement to look at BCS, it's not actually offering any form of migration. There's nothing to help you get from using business connectivity services across to Power Apps. It's go ahead and explore it, see if this is a suitable alternative for you, and if it is, well, then you need to go through and start configuring that and using it. And if you are going to be using this to connect to SQL, unfortunately, to be able to connect to external data, you do need the premium license of Power Apps as well. So this isn't something that is freely available as with most of Power Apps. So when you go into Power Apps, you'll be able to connect to external data. It's one of the options. Where's your data going to come from, or start with data? And with that, you can see some different options. Of course, there's Dataverse that's supported. There's Excel. There's also SharePoint lists and other external data as well. So Microsoft can start you off this way, or you can also start off with a blank canvas and generate your own connection to cloud or on-premises type data sources. And once you've made the configuration and you've built your app, you've published it, you can also go ahead and embed that on a page within inside of SharePoint. So then we've done full circle. You can go into SharePoint and you can access the data coming from your line of business systems. And of course, you've got that ability to not just view it, but also write back to that data as well. The other alternative is to also use Power BI. So Power BI, again, been around for a long time as a business intelligence reporting tool. If ever you've got into Power BI, you'll notice there's just a never-ending list of things that you can connect to. Of course, SQL is in there, both Azure and on-premises, but you're also going to find Oracle and all sorts of other things as well, literally hundreds of different data sources that you might want to connect to. And most people think purely about the chart components that you can create inside of Power BI and building a dashboard. But one of the things you can also create is just a grid of data. It's one of the visualizations that you can use. You can drop that onto a report. You can pick and choose the columns that you want to see inside of that report. And once you've got that, you can publish it out to a workspace with inside of Power BI. And once it's there, you can either take a full dashboard or you can take a report and embed that inside the Power BI web part on a SharePoint page, as I've done in the top left-hand screenshot. And of course, that could be a dashboard full of other charts and components as well that you want to use. So fantastic if you've got Power BI already. If you've already got licenses, you could go ahead and use this as an alternative. But if you haven't, you will either need to be using the E5 license of SharePoint, or also look at purchasing Power BI Pro licenses, because without that, you could use the Power BI desktop in order to be able to configure the reports and so on, but only you will be able to see them. As soon as you want to share that and publish it out anywhere, then you start to require the additional licenses. So let's take a look at how we can use Power Apps as an alternative to BCS. So what I'm going to do is just jump back into our browser here, and let's go into Power Apps. So with Power Apps, you'll notice that once we're in there, there's the start with data. So we can start with data, we can start with the page design. There's also lots of different app templates that we can also start with as well. So clicking on to start with data allows us to begin with the actual data source in which our Power App is going to be mapped to. So in here, there's a few different examples or different options. We can upload an Excel file. There's the start with a blank table, so you can start designing that way. Or we've also got over on the right hand side here, the select external data. So if we choose that option, Microsoft's presenting us a few of the Microsoft options. So you've got SharePoint. So this gives us a list of recent sites that we've been working with. So if you wanted to build a Power App that was based on a SharePoint list, that's something that you could also do. So you're effectively designing a new form-based sort of app in order to be able to capture data into a SharePoint list. You can also work with Excel. So anybody that has been around with SharePoint 2007 and so on, and maybe was used to using Excel services, this is actually a great replacement for that as well. So you can still collect data inside of Excel, albeit through Power Apps. Or there's also from SQL which is what we're going to be doing here. So I've already configured the connection to my SQL environment. If you need to do that, then you can simply click onto the add new connection here, and it's going to challenge you for, of course, the server name as well as the credentials in order to be able to authenticate with that database. But once you are connected and you've authenticated, you'll see a list of different tables and views and so on that you can work with. So I'm going to work with the product table, and this is coming from the AdventureWorks database. So once I've selected that, I can hit Create App. That's going through and creating the app for me inside of Power Apps. So we'll just give that a moment to load. It's doing quite a lot behind the scenes here. And so here we are in the in the design experience, and we've got our welcome to the Power App Studio, where we've got that guided tour and so on as well that we can run through. But it's already configured everything I need for me. I've got the ability over on the left-hand side here to select some of the different products. Of course, I'm just in the design mode here, but we can select the different products, and that's going to load each item with inside the Canvas app here, and we've got all of the different fields already mapped. And we can use this design studio in order to be able to build the app and make it look like what we want. There's different themes and background colors and things like that we can go through and apply. And of course, once we're ready, we can go through and publish that. And you've got that ability to preview it here. So if we click onto preview, now I can go through and select the different items. So you'll notice we can choose those, see the different fields, view our data effectively, and we can also go through and edit that data as well. So if I wanted to change any of the colors of these products or change the cost or anything like that, we can go through and do that, and then accept the changes once we've made them. And you've also got the ability to search as well. So if we do a search on mountain, for example, we can see all the different mountain bike frames and things like that coming back. Select one of those and start working with that. So where that is at the moment, of course, this is in Power Apps, it's not in SharePoint. So at the moment, I would say that's not really a direct replacement for what we had with Business Connectivity Services, because your users may be used to going into a SharePoint site and accessing data from there. But there is actually the Power Apps web part that we can use in order to be able to embed this on a page. So once we're ready with the design, we can we can go through and share this. So if we hit share here, let's just save that. So we could share this with other people. We can give it a name as well. So I'm just going to call this LT VentureWorks -products. Okay, so let's just hit save on that. Okay, and then when we go to share it, we could share it by sending an email, etc. But what I'm going to do is just grab this web link here and copy that, and then we can go back into our SharePoint environment. Let's navigate back. Oops, sorry, tend to click onto the notebook. Let's go back to our pages. And I've already created a page with the app embedded. Of course, the Blue Peter version. But what we're going to do is just go through and edit the page here, and we'll add another instance of that. So at the bottom of the page here, we'll go through and add the Microsoft Power Apps web part. And this is where we can paste in that web link, and it will now load the Power App for me. And yeah, we can allow that premium feature of connecting to SQL. And of course, we'd need the licenses in order to be able to do that. But we now have that embedded on the page where people can view the data, they can access that data, edit the data, delete the data, etc., all from within inside of SharePoint. And of course, you could also bring that into Teams as well if you wanted to. So that's one alternative to business connectivity services. And like I said, there's also the Power BI as well that you could also use. So using Power BI, When you go into Power BI, you'll notice that there's different options of adding data to a report. You could also import data from SQL, from Excel, etc. But you've also got that option to get data from another source. And this is going to present to you all those different places where you can get data from. And as I mentioned, there's hundreds of them. So you'll see different databases, including Oracle and MySQL and things like that. There's also Azure components, including SQL Azure. You can also connect to things like SharePoint Online and OData and things like that if you wanted to. So there's lots of different places where you can get data. You can build the different visualizations, publish that out, and use that inside a web part as well on your page. And what I should have actually mentioned is also inside of Power Apps. If we were to just navigate home here, you only saw a few different options. You didn't see all those options that we had inside of Power BI, but they are there. So if we click onto, sorry, not start with data, it's start with the page design, and I'll go with the blank canvas. Okay, so just give that a moment. So at the very top here, we've got add data, and we've also got connectors. And with inside those connectors, you'll notice that we can see all connectors, and we're going to see similar options to what you've got available through Power BI as well. If we just do a search on something like Oracle, you're going to see Oracle in there, and of course we can go through and authenticate with Oracle and build a Canvas app around that. Albeit you'll need to do pretty much everything manually here if you're using this approach rather than what you saw before, where everything was effectively created for you. Okay, so let's just jump back into the slides for a moment and have a look at what Lightning Tools can also offer you. So we've seen Power Apps, we've seen Power BI. What I want to demonstrate to you is, first of all, the data viewer. And this is a product that has been around for quite some time. It was available for SharePoint on premises as well. We've evolved it to SharePoint Online and also through Microsoft Teams. And of course, extended it to the different data sources that you can connect to, which we'll be taking a look at as well. Accompanying that is Lightning Tools Filters, which is actually a free component that you can use. So again, as a sort of direct replacement, Lightning Tools Filters really replaces the BDC filters web part that we had back in SharePoint on premises, and that allows you to filter the contents of the data viewer in the same way that the BDC filter would filter the contents of the BDC list web part and the related list web parts. So we're going to take a look at those two. We're also going to have a look at the product that we're now offering, which is through AxioWorks. So AxioWorks is one of our partners here in the UK. They've been also around and established for many, many years, and they have a component called SQList, which actually does the reverse of business connectivity services. It allows you to take SharePoint lists and push the content or synchronize the content back to SQL tables that could be in on premises or in SQL Azure, and that gives you the ability to then integrate that data with other line of business systems, but also have the benefit of that data being inside of SharePoint as well, where people are collaborating and so on. And we're not really going to do a demo of Lightning Forms, but just to give a scenario here of how you could use Lightning Forms in relation to SQList. And that is that if you built some forms such as purchase order forms or expense reporting forms and things like that inside of SharePoint, so you've got that there for the convenience, but then you want that data to also be captured somewhere else inside another line of business system, or be able to report on it more effectively, then you could use SQList to be able to synchronize the SharePoint list forms all the way back, or list data rather, back to the SQL tables as well. So we'll start off looking at the data viewer, and the data viewer is a very simple modern web part. So it's a direct replacement for what you had with the external list, albeit it's modern. You can very easily add things like conditional formatting, grouping, calculated columns, summary functions, and things like that without actually having to write any XML or anything which you would have had to have done using some of the BDC web parts. You can also connect to multiple data sources. So it does include SQL. It also includes Oracle. You can connect to Excel You can go through BCS at the moment, and also you could connect to Microsoft Graph connectors as well, which also opens it up to a similar list of different data sources that you saw with Power BI and Power Apps. So once you've configured the connection, you've got a choice of, is this data going to live inside a list like the external list, or is it also going to be a chart? So you get kind of the best of both worlds. You get really what Power Apps is offering, as well as what Power BI is offering in terms of we can have grid views of data that are updatable, or we can also have charts displayed on our SharePoint page as well. You can have multiple instances connected. So you've got that same ability to take one list showing the one side of a relationship, firing a connection to the many side, like we did with the VDC list and the related list web parts. So that again is using connections on a page. And you've also got the write back as well, so you can insert, update, and delete SQL data via the web part as well. So unlike sort of Power Apps, this is more of a sort of direct replacement for BCS, which isn't necessarily saying it's better. It depends on what your requirements are. But let's go through and have a look at how you could use BCS use Data Viewer inside of SharePoint to do a similar thing to what BCS was offering. So we're going to go into a modern SharePoint page. We've got in here called the Data Viewer. And one of the things I've made just as a quick change on this page before we get started was actually changing the section to a 2-column section, because what we can jump straight into doing with the Data Viewer is effectively building quite a powerful dashboard, which is taking up multiple columns. We could even go to 3 columns if we want. You can control that to be different sizes of columns, so you could have 1/3 left and 2/3 right, and so on. So in the left-hand side of my page, I'm going to add a Data Viewer. And then next to it, I can also add another Data Viewer as well. And this is where it becomes really useful to join those 2 web parts together, so you're not just having to scroll up and down the page all the time. You can see them side by side, which works really well when you've got those joins between things like customers and orders. So using the one on the left-hand side, we'll just hit Configure, and we'll go. That takes us straight into the configuration view, where we've just got 4 tabs down the left-hand side in order to be able to configure our web part. There are some properties over on the right which we'll be exploring as well, but initially let's just go through and choose what we're going to connect to. So the list looks relatively small in comparison to Power BI and also Power Apps, but some of these have a lot behind the scenes. Of course, there's connecting to a SharePoint list. If we were to select that, you'll notice the Data Source tab presents us with the ability to navigate our SharePoint environment and select a list that we want to connect to. So it's great in terms of being able to take a list from another site and show it here rather than duplicating the content and so on. We've also got business connectivity services, which I'm just going to sort of step over because that's disappearing as we know. There's also OData, so that can virtually connect to anything where you've got an OData service, something that you published or maybe an external publisher. We've got SQL Azure as well, where we can, go back to the data source, where we can go through and configure a connection to SQL Azure. And then we've also got Excel as well as the graph connectors, which, as I mentioned, through the graph connectors, there's all sorts of different things that we can connect to. You'll notice that I've got some connectors already created to things like Jira and to Salesforce or even our corporate website. And the way that you configure those connectors is actually directly inside of the Microsoft 365 admin page. So when you go into admin, if you select the search and intelligence and then go down to data sources, you can go through and add a new connection. And some of these you can create without actually having to write any code or do anything. It's just a case of configuring it. So you'll see here there's the ability to connect to SQL Server on premises. So you could effectively bring in data from SQL Server on premises into the Data Viewer web part in the cloud. There's also things like Jira, which I'm going to demonstrate to you, in Salesforce and so on that you can use, and SQL Azure, etc. But there is also the custom connector. Using that, you can virtually connect to whatever you want. It's whatever you've created as a custom connector, and then you can bring the data into SharePoint that way. So that's one of the options there as well, is to use the graph connector. And as I mentioned, if we go into that, let's just do a quick look at that one. So I'll choose Jira demo, which is our Jira environment. I'm just going to select the different columns from there. I won't worry about formatting for now. I'm just going to save that just to show you how we can bring that data in from something like Jira and display that with inside the web part here. And I could either then create another new view, so I could label this view as Jira, and then add a new view, which is going to be SQL products or AdventureWorks products, and we could make this one the default view as well. So you'll notice that you then get that option of having multiple views of data all inside that same web part instance. So using our SQL products configuration, let's go through and choose SQL Azure. And I'm going to start off with a grid view rather than a chart view, but we will get to charts. Under the data source tab, we're just going to go through and connect to that. So just bear with me one moment as we key that in. So okay, we're just going to enter our credentials here, and then we can load the entity. So that's connecting to my SQL Azure environment. We hope. There we go. And I can now go through and select a database. So I'm going to choose the AdventureWorks database, and I can choose one of the tables coming from that database. So I'm going to start off with the product table. And then just like what we saw with Jira, we can go through and choose different columns coming from that table. So we've got things like color and list price and standard cost, size, weight. Also have product name and product category ID. And once we've selected those, we can drag them and drop them where we want them to appear in terms of from left to right. And we can also add calculated columns, create filters and things like that all from here, and also go through and configure the display as well. So for the display, something that you had to do manually using XML with the BDC web parts was things like setting things as currency, whereas I can just simply do that using the data formatting here. I don't have to actually write any code to do that at all. And you can also do grouping, do color formatting, and so on and so forth. There's also the ability to allow the updates, allow new data to be inserted, etc. There's pagination that we have as well. And if we are using web part connections, then you may also want to turn on the allow selecting rows so that you can fire that connection to another web part. So if we choose SQL products, good start. Let's just see what's going on there. Let me just clear that one. So something was amiss. So we'll just give that one more shot. And drag these into, like I said, the order that we want them to appear in. There we go. There we are. That's a bit better. Okay, so we've got our data coming back, and yeah, like I said, we can go through and do conditional formatting and things like that if we want to. So if we just nip back into that view, I'm just going to drag weight up where we can see it. because I've got those obviously side by side. You'll notice that we've got the weight of the products. Some of them don't have a weight, some do. Some of them get very heavy. So what we could do with that one is actually go through and add some conditional formatting. So you don't have to go back into the grid view if you don't want to. We can just configure it here. So I could say if the weight is greater than 5,000, then let's add a little warning, which could be some form of icon in amber. So we'll save that. And let's just do an easy thing here of sorting from larger to smaller. And there we go, we've got that conditional formatting being applied as well. Okay, so we've got our first web part here. Let's just actually switch these two around. So I've got the list over on the left, and I'm gonna configure this one in a similar way. And we're going to load the entities. This time, I'm going to select the categories table. So let's just find the product categories. And this has in it the name of the product and also the product category ID. So I'm just going to choose those two, and we'll allow selecting rows on this one. And I'm also going to set some pagination here. We'll set that as 20. So we've got the list of categories coming back. And as you can see on the right hand side, in fact, let's just go through and add to this one. I think I did select it the first time. We still do. Let's just bring that up to the top there. Okay, so you'll see here we've got the product category ID, which is a foreign key in the backend database table, and then a primary key over on the left here. So we're going to simply select the second one under the columns. We'll go to the product category ID primary key, foreign key, and we're going to set that equal to a web part connection where we can choose our other data viewer with the selected item and pass through that product category ID. So what should happen now is we can simply go through and select different categories that we want to see. Some of those clearly don't have any categories. Just give that a go. Yep, there we are. So we've got some options coming back as we go through and select those with inside that web part, which is very similar to what you have with the BDC list and the BDC related list web parts. So there's also a lot of categories. So what we could do is, of course, filter from the web part itself. There's the filter option in here, but we could also use the lightning filters web part. So that's another web part that we're just going to quickly introduce, and we're going to take a look at some of the charts as well with the data viewer. So the lightning filters, the reason for that, as well as being able to filter inside the data viewer itself, if you've got multiple data viewers on the page all forming part of a dashboard, you could have 10 or more web parts on there. You may want to filter it centrally so that all of the web parts consume the connection from a filter web part. And that could be by reporting by date or something. So sales figures per month or per quarter or something along those lines. So you want to be able to have that central location where you could pass that filter through. And that's exactly what we can do with the filter web part, and have different types of filter controls on the page as well. So if we navigate back, you'll notice that the initial control we've got with that lightning filters is a slider, a number filter, but we could change that to a date filter, or we've also got things like people filters, and every time we change that, it's going to change the behavior of the web part. So we're just going to simply go with a standard text filter, and we can change the label here to say enter a product name or a product category. So we're giving some instruction to the user as to what they're expected to do here. And if we go into that initial web part, we can bring up the properties again, and against that name, we can add a connection to the filter web part where it says enter a product category. We'll select that, and we're going to choose the filter value. And I'll change the operator here to a contains. So the benefit now is that we should be able to enter something like bike. If I could remember what some of those categories were. Never mind. Anyway, that is, if I remembered the values, that would be able to filter that initial web part, allow me to then go through and find the items that I'm looking for. So that's with the text filter. Let's just remove that, and then I might be able to see my the errors of my ways. Yeah, maybe that should have worked, but something I might be misconfiguring. So also with the data viewer, as I mentioned, you could also build out charts. So if I select the data viewer again, it's exactly the same component, but what we're going to go through this time and do is build a chart view as opposed to a grid view. So if we select the chart view, the data source can remain the same. So that again is going to be the demo server in SQL Azure. And once more, selecting the AdventureWorks database, and we'll go through and once more choose the product table. So when we're looking at the list of columns this time, we're thinking of them as though we're building a chart. So what we can go through and connect to is the standard cost. We'll also have the list price in here, and it's also good with color at that point. So once we've chosen the fields that we want, again, we could add calculated columns and filters if we want to that would affect our chart. We can go across to the view, and something like color gives us the option of grouping by it. So of course, if there's any repeatable values, such as color or category or anything like that, we can go through and select it. So we'll group by the color, and now we can see the price of each of the different items in different colors. So the default of these is to sum, but we've got other aggregate functions that we can use. And you can also set different types of charts. So there's things like column. We could choose the theme colors so that it blends in with the SharePoint theme as well. And we've also got things like area type charts and things like that too. We could go through and set that, or of course this could also be a column as well. And if we get into the chart settings, you'll also notice we can do things like stacking those charts if we want to, or leave them side by side. So once we've got that configured, we can hit save, and we've got our first chart. And we could label that as column chart. And if we want to, inside the same web part instance, we could clone this view, but let's have a pie chart this time. So depending on how you may want to see it, of course, that could be a separate web part instance if we wanted to, but we could come down here to the display, and we could change this out to a pie chart. So we're also grouping by colors, and we've got the split of that, and we could maybe show average or sum, however we want to display that data. You can make that also 3D. You can rotate it. So you've got the angle of rotation. You can choose how you want to display that in terms of the value, whether it's a percentage, etc. So once we've saved that one, we've got that as a separate view where we can choose either the column or the chart web part. And like I said, they could also be separate instances, but this just allows you to sort of drill into that data if you want to and show it in a different way. Okay, so that's just a couple of the different charts. There's more that you can go at as well. So under the display here, you'll see there's also things like tree maps and gauges. There's geo maps and things like that you can also configure with that one. All right, so we've seen the data viewer. We've had a look at lightning filters. And final product we're going to take a look at today is SQList. So this, as I mentioned, is through a partnership where there's a great fit between some of the products that we offer and the product that AxioWorks offers, which is the SQList, and that is synchronizing SharePoint lists with SQL. And this gives near real-time sync. That's just nudged me to also mention that the data viewer is a permanent connection as well to the data source that you connect to. So unlike Power BI, as data changes in the data source that you're connecting to, you're going to see immediate changes inside of SharePoint as that gets modified throughout the day. So what we're going to do this time is actually show a SharePoint list which has some data in it. I'm going to go through and connect that to a SQL table so that, again, that could be integrated into other lines of business applications. So the list in question, let's just publish our page here. The list in question is an expense report list. It's actually made up of two lists. So we have expense report as well as expense list. If we just go through and create an item, you'll notice that this has been customized also using Lightning forms. So it's not resembling a standard SharePoint list. We've got multiple tabs. We've also got related tables on or related lists on here as well. So if we do an expense claim for a particular user, I can put in who I am, who my manager is. We can choose the date of the report and start to add some expense items. So we could do a claim for transport, maybe a taxi or something like that. And we could also do a claim for food. So we've got two different items in here embedded on the list. And when we save that or submit it, it's going to write back to two different lists. So we've got the expense list, which is collecting those expense items. And then we've got the expense report, which has got that sort of header information about the list itself. So what I'm going to do is just grab the URL to this site here because we've got the convenience of this form and these lists being in SharePoint, so people can find them, they can collaborate around them. They could also be in Teams if we wanted them to be. But now what we want to do is bring that into SQList so we can work with it inside of a SQL database. So let's just bring up the SQList manager. And we start off with a new replication. You can see I've already configured some SharePoint connections, but I'm going to walk you through how we do that. Of course, you don't have to configure these every single time. You can just do it once effectively and select from there the lists that you want to work with. I'm just going to call this BCS webinar. And you've got a table prefix where every table inside of the SQL database is going to be prefixed with this name. So I'll just leave that a bit shorter than BCS-webinar. Let's just go with BCS. And we've got the site URL that we're going to start working with using SharePoint. In terms of how we want to authenticate, we can authenticate here with username and password. So we just drop that information in. Okay, and hit next, and hopefully, let's just try that one more time. Oh, sorry, demo, not LT demo. There we go. So once I've connected, I can either bring in lists and libraries that have similar names or match names, or we can also go through and select individual lists and libraries that we also want to replicate. So I'm going to choose that option. That then gives me the tree view, so we can expand from the site that I provided down through the different subsites and so on, if there are any. But you'll notice in here, it's returning all the different lists and libraries, including the expense list and the expense report, which are the two that I want to bring into SQL so we can better report from them and so on. So we've got the two So we've got then database connections that I've already configured. I can create a new database connection. Again, I could reuse the one of the ones that we've just used there. I'm just going to give that a name of BCS webinar again. And then we've got our SQL Server instance, which you're getting used to me typing in here. And we can choose our database name. And I've already created a database here called SQList demo, which we're going to use, which is a SQL Azure database. Notice we could connect to on-prem if we wanted to, and we're going to use a SQL account in order to be able to authenticate with that database. Let me just double check that. There we go. Okay, so once we've got the SQL connection configured, we're now naming our replication. So again, we're just going to go with BCS webinar, and we hit finish. Okay, so changes have been made, and it's now synced that out to the SQL database. So to prove that, let's use the data viewer one more time. So we'll go through into SharePoint. Let's add a page here. And so for the last time, you'll see me type this in. I don't know why I didn't pop this onto the clipboard. Would have been easier. So we'll load our entities. And here's our SQList demo database, as that was pre-created, but in here you can see the BCS underscore expense list and BCS underscore expense report. So if we select the report, let's go through and choose the columns. So this is showing the columns such as the title, which was the expense item. We've got things like the total expenses, the claimant, the manager, and so on. And again, we can drag and drop those into the order that we want them to appear in. And under display, we could do all of our formatting. But as we hit save in here, you can see the information created, and that's bringing that data back in from the database. So we've got the four items. The total expenses for that last one was 170. So let's just publish that page and give it a name. So we'll go into our expense report. So that was our fourth one with total expenses of 170. And let's just put one more item in there. Okay, so we should have item number 5. And you can see how that's already been queried through the data viewer as that's been published back into the SQL database. All right, so bang on time, but we didn't have time for questions yet, but I'm happy to go over. So if you are, feel free to use the chat window for any questions that you've got, or the Q&A panel. I'll be very happy to answer any questions there. Or if you prefer, you could raise your hand, I could unmute you, you can ask a question verbally as well. Just whilst you're thinking, if there is any questions, some information on the slide here, you could book a demo. If there's anything here that you would like to see more of, just scan that QR code, you'll be able to schedule a demo directly in my calendar. I'd be happy to go into more detail with the products. And there's also some other our Twitter handle, also the help@lightningtools.com, where you can speak to our customer success team, and we've also got our website as well. So Mitch, I see you've got your hand raised, so I'm just going to allow your mic.
Thought I'd jump in there real quick, Brett. Thank you very much. In the Q&A queue, there's a bunch of questions surrounding, okay, what's the external lookup list solution here? I didn't see it in your discussion. Is there something out there you haven't spoken about that gives us hope for the future?
Great question. Yeah, absolutely. So yes, it's not something that is available yet, but we are looking at that with Lightning Forms. So the form design tool. So already we've got the ability using Lightning Forms to create a cross-site lookup. So you can look at from another list somewhere else if you needed to. That can work with an external list, but of course that's going to disappear. So for that reason, we are using or looking to use something like the graph connectors in order to be able to configure an external data lookup as well. So whilst that's not here yet, hopefully that will be in the near future.
I'm quivering with anticipation.
Great. Okay, thank you, Mitch. And thanks for getting up early as well. All right, I'm just going to jump to the Q&A panel. So you put a few questions in there. Great. So I'll just read some of these out. So I admire demo courage. Yeah, it's speaking and configuring at the same time. It always brings exciting results. So just have a quick scan through. So I think that was the question that you just asked.
All my questions in the Q&A revolve around that issue. You've addressed it. Thank you.
Okay, great. No problem. All right. So I have another question as well. So is it possible to access the data setup in the data viewer web part using the REST API for performing CRUD operations in the SPFX app, similar to an external list? So yeah, you have got CRUD, create, remove, update, delete with SQL, but not yet with REST. So that again is on our roadmap to bring that in line with everything else as well. If you're using OData or a web service to bring back the data, that is currently read-only. But you can read-write with SQL. And yeah, I see another hand raised. So Satish, let me just allow your mic. Okay. So you may need to.
Are you able to hear me?
I can indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for this call. I was just waiting for something like this. So what we have is why I ask this question is via the REST, because we are having SharePoint framework app, and we are using the external list where we are doing the CRUD operation. So with the out of the box web part you are using, and that is a custom app we build around that one, and that's why we were looking for a REST or some sort of call to that data what you are showing us. So as you mentioned, it is not possible. Do you know when, as you mentioned, that is in your roadmap? Is there any timeline for that one, or that will be a long way to go, right?
So again, great questions. So with the ability to read write, I think that's something that we will see in one of the releases, of course, this year. I'm just going to point you to where you will find our roadmap. It's not fully complete yet because we're just creating the roadmap for this year currently. It will give you an idea when the next releases are, but not going into too much detail just yet. So yeah, our first release is going to be May, or sorry, the next release in May for the data viewer. So yeah, we would hope to see some of those options appearing then and being able to write back to multiple data sources, not just the SQL Azure.
Okay, and you connect this data viewer web part with the on-premise data source as well?
Yeah, so the way that you would do that is using graph connectors.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the only way through the SharePoint framework that you could connect to an on-premises database. So yeah, if you went into the search and intelligence options under the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, you could connect to on-prem using a connector there, and then use the data viewer in order to be able to consume that. So these options inside of the Admin Center are primarily for search. Notice it's appearing under search and intelligence, but we're able to utilize those connections that you configure with inside the data viewer to bring that data into a sort of visual way. And that's how I display that data coming in from Jira as well.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Brett. And
Yeah,
why like Microsoft is pushing on the Power Apps? Because if you see, I have the cost associated with is way high, and a lot of functionality I don't think so as is, but they are pushing heavily on Power Apps.
Yeah, you might have answered your own question there. But yeah, absolutely. So Microsoft is pushing Power Apps, and as you mentioned, it does carry that premium charge, which I think is around in the UK it's £16 I think per user, which is probably around $25 or something like that per user. So yeah, depending on the size of organization and the amount of people that can be using it, that could be extremely costly. In order to be able to build a solution which, like I say, answering your own question, Microsoft is interested in making money. So yeah, that's certainly one reason behind it. And likewise with Power BI, what I was hoping to demonstrate today is the fact that you may already have these licenses as well for other reasons. You may already have the Power Apps premium licenses or Power BI Pro licenses, in which case it makes sense to take advantage of those licenses and use that as a solution. But if you're looking purely to replace BCS now and you don't have those licenses, yeah, it could be an expensive option. The data viewer could be certainly a better option economically, but I'm also going to be fair here and say that it's not actually equivalent in terms of functionality as Power BI. There's a lot more that you could do with Power BI, but it depends what you want to do, what you want to accomplish, which is hopefully what I'm getting across today.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much for your help.
You're welcome. Thank you. And one other point from Mitch there is any insights on Microsoft's motivation for killing BCS. So it's really been untouched since 2013 or SharePoint 2013. There's not really been any love shown to it since then. They've not adapted it for the modern experience. And I think whenever the European SharePoint conference back in Vienna was, I think it's something like 2016 or thereabouts, I was actually delivering a session on business connectivity services, and thankfully after my session there was a product manager in the room from business connectivity services team, and they came up to me at the end of that and said that they're actually going to be dropping BCS and looking at Power Apps. So it was a decision that was made a long time ago to change this direction to using Power Apps instead of BCS. I'm not sure of the internal reasons as to why they decided to. All right, I don't see any other questions. So at that point, I'm just going to thank you for attending, and hopefully you found this useful. It was recorded. I will publish it, and you'll be able to watch that back online. If you go to lightningtools.com and click onto our webinars, you'll see it there, and you can share it with any colleagues, or if you be so kind, share it on social media as well. Be fantastic. But yeah, thank you very much for attending, everybody, and see you on the next one.